As we continue to move our way towards Graceland, as we've said the last 2 weeks, not Memphis, Tennessee, but living the life of eternity here on earth, I would invite you to consider this, begin to think about what it feels like to be in Graceland. I'll share a quick picture here with you. This was a few years ago. Yes, I fly, we fly. That's Terry and I in the I Fly tunnel. We weren't that good at it. Terry's one was a lot better than this dead weight body. But hey, I'm off the ground, am I not? We were early adopters into the I Fly possibilities because one of our very close friends was the marketing director who led the brand here into the United States. And Shelley gave us an opportunity to fly in the tunnel several times and given us that opportunity. One day I remember asking Shelley, I said, Shelley, when does this business, because they were multiplied, how quickly they multiplied, when do you think this business that's heavily capitalized, having to build so many buildings, when do you think it'll start making money? Shelley looked at me like I was silly for asking us a question like that. She goes, I don't think about those kind of things. I just love my job flying. That's kind of what it feels like to live in Graceland. And while, yes, there are the mundane and routine things of our life that are required to think about, we are lifted by something that is bigger and better than us by the very grace of God is where we live. The concept of grace is sometimes called mercy. In the Old Testament, it's that word hesed that we've learned over the past. It means a faithful, covenant-bound, like a wedding-bound, covenant-bound love of God. That grace comes to us, that hesed comes to us from above. It comes by God's initiative. The word hesed in the Old Testament turns into the word charis in the New Testament. Guess what? It means the same thing. The divine and gracious favor that comes to us by where? Not by us, but by God's initiative. God's initiating grace is the golden thread throughout the biblical account. And if you cannot read the biblical stories without reading it through the lens of grace, you'll be tempted to distort the story and sometimes use the narrative in even destructive ways. Have we seen that? But if you read the text through the lens of grace, you will see God's unmerited favor that comes to us from above. We read about it throughout this text today. As we affirm the reality of grace in Romans 8, we read in verse 31 that God's grace protects us. If God is for us, who can be against us? I like to think of the Spirit as an older sibling keeping an eye on me. Hey, I got you down there. If you get in trouble, let me know. God's grace provides for us. If God has given us His own Son, will not God provide everything else we need in creation? Yes, God's grace is always present. For nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ our Lord. Now that'd be a nice little sermon, wouldn't it be? Grace protects, provides, presents. No, that didn't work for me. Because I want to talk about the journey to Graceland. How do you get there? Let's talk about a packing list first. Packing list always includes things that we think we need to take, and then all packing list always includes things that we end up leaving behind because we know we didn't need them on the trip anyway, right? What are some things that we probably need to leave behind when we go into Graceland? How about we leave behind, I deserve it my kind of way? That's not necessary in Graceland. A ledger of merits and demerits will weigh down your luggage if you try to take those to Graceland. Our self-achieving ways, how they don't need to come with us. They can be left behind. I don't have anything to prove to go to Graceland. You can discard that propensity towards scarcity. I get so tired of hearing about scarcity. What we don't have in the church, we have a God who put cattle all over the hills. Or that quid quo pro attitude that says, if you do something for me, I'll do something for you. We don't need that in Graceland. It will not serve us well. And it takes an immense humiliation. Yes, an humiliation. To surrender to those things. To set my ego says, I have what I need, and what I earn, and what I achieve, and what I merit, how I get in line, what I know. We think that's who we are. But it takes an humiliation of our ego to surrender those things. Let them go. Leave them behind. Our sense that we need those things going to Graceland comes, somehow they got to go in our travel bags, comes from a mistaken view of who God is. People who feel the need to carry these unnecessary items usually view God as some parent in the sky. Oh, hey, I'm down here. I got to watch my P's and Q's, right, with you. I better watch out. You better not. That's the view of God that so many people carry around. They are the catchphrases of an early developed faith. not a mature faith. They make choices that are motivated by duty and obligation. Somehow we hope we'll store up enough good deeds in our life. And these suitcases that we carry around in our lives, suitcases that are also good. Look all the good stuff I've done. I got to look, big suitcase, packed good stuff. We don't need that going to Graceland. Because guess what happens when you finally get to arrive at Graceland? You realize that the things you thought you depended here on earth really serve no purpose at all. The tiring storyline of reward and punishment promoted by our Western culture makes no sense in Graceland. Good news has nothing to do with requirements that you have to count and measure. Because we don't get there by our own. Not at all. No, we don't get there by our own. We surrender, remember? Our ego. Realizing when we surrender ego, when we do that, we realize everything around us in this world is already filled with the goodness and love of God. Everything we need. Graceland's like a good banquet that Jesus invites everyone to. It's a good banquet where they serve fine wine fashioned by grapes of grace. We're there by God's initiative, and it keeps saying here, have more to eat of this grace. And eventually we realize that we belong in this banquet. We can't be separated from it once we're there. And we have been transformed within by the grace of God. With everything we need in our souls that we can carry forward. All that other stuff in the packing list we can leave behind. And finally we get to move into Graceland. We start to move into Graceland. That shadow self we talked about, we can leave it outside the party. Go, I don't need you. You served me well for a while. That's false. That's not who I really am. Now we're kind of walking in the light of God's love as we start to move into Graceland. And the only thing that can ever keep you from fully moving in and living full time in Graceland is what? The only thing that can keep you is your unwillingness to trust that there is an unmerited grace that will provide for you every step of the way. It's the faith and above that says, God, I know you'll provide, you'll protect, you're present with me no matter what. And now you're able to detect all the ways that grace is around you. Life no longer, it seems to be so hard, and God seems to be so absent because goodness is everywhere. It no longer makes it necessary, my friends, to choose that wide door we keep walking through that leads us down easy street to parts unknown. God's grace is hard to notice when you're on a crowded street, my friends, in the highways of our lives. No, we move into Graceland through a narrow door, and through the roads less traveled. After we've excavated what might be trouble in our souls, we go through that narrow place and we go, oh, this is a new place, a quiet place, a place I can see and know the grace of God. The only prerequisite for moving into Graceland is to receive what is in front of you for the moment. My friend, the person sitting in front of you in that pew and the person sitting beside you right now is a gift of grace from God at this moment, at this place. And you begin to see that every moment, when you leave here, God's there. And you're willing to receive that moment for what it is. And the grace keeps on giving because you keep receiving. The longer you receive it, grace does not exhaust itself. We just have to say, look, there it is. There she is. There he is. And the road to Graceland is paved by resurrections. Resurrections that led us here. We're no longer afraid of falling or failing. Because we knew at the bottom of all things in our lives, guess what happened? The full measure of grace came along and lifted us up. Like water that seeks the lowest level of the crevice, it says, look, you can float up here with me. And when we get to Graceland, we moved in, we look, well, look, how did that bridge get there that it brought me here? And we realized that bridge that we crossed to get here, we had nothing to do with it. it's provided by the grace of God. Grace isn't something God gives. Grace is who God is. Grace is God's job description. Grace joins all things together. Are you ready to move into Graceland? Because all the gaps you see in your life, all the distinctions, all the discriminations, all of your preferences, God brings all together by the grace of God, because the Spirit of God is the goodness glue that says, you know what, all this you can't make sense of, I can bring together by the grace of God. Our spirit now abides and our true selves live. And now we're living in Graceland. Small, sometimes just large things happen every day in Graceland. Because by faith we are relishing in God's divine abundance. Our soul continued to expand because we are sharing in the life of God. We are in union with God's Spirit. Try it often as we can, moment by moment, each day. It's like falling in love. Remember last time you fell in love? The more you trusted the one you fell in love with, the deeper you fell in love with. That's what it's like. It's heaven on earth as we eat and taste the riches of God's mercy. My friends, the witnesses of previous faith are those who great cloud of witnesses, mystics from everywhere, saints that we've known, transformed people, have declared throughout history that there exists an unexplainable goodness at work in the universe. An unexplainable goodness that God is filling the world with, redeeming evil and magnifying good. I'd like you to meet Catherine Wolfe. She lives in Graceland.
What happens to you in life, as bad or as great as it isn't really what matters. It's how you respond. After the out of nowhere brainstem stroke that left me severely disabled, there was no options really than having to redefine my understanding of everything in this world. Healing was a concept that I only understood as being if you are exactly like what is considered normal. If we had to go through something hellacious, why not move forward in strength and take it with us and really use this? And instead of saying this is some terrible punishment or some like horrible thing and you're really bitter about it, instead seeing it as a privilege. It's really an honor to get to suffer well and show the world what it means to really suffer well, to wait well, to hope well, things that in our world people are not about. People are not about anything that isn't perfect and pretty and like they thought it was going to be. I 100% felt angry almost. In the beginning, that's totally gone away now, but angry probably at God, at the world, at my situation. Like, this cannot be what healing looks like. But the deepest healing that I needed was to change that. To understand, like, I may not look healed to the world, but my heart is healed. I do not feel any anger, any anguish, any bitterness at all. All of those feelings have been entirely covered by a deep hope. I think we have to redefine words, understandings, concepts to make sense of our lives and to really walk in freedom. So choosing joy is never about denying reality. And my joy is also rooted in the reality of the world. That things are hard. Life is painful. That it's not going to be perfect and one note and awesome all the time. And I think that is so important to recognize. It's When we can have lowered expectations of what our lives will look like, we can overwhelm our expectations by how awesome things are.
But I've reason to believe we all will be received at Graceland.
Friends, what she has to say to us is this. Yes, life is hard. But no matter what hardness or struggle you have, you know that the God Spirit is seeing you through each day. How did Paul Simon figure this out before maybe some of us did? When he wrote these words, for reasons I cannot explain, there's some part of me who wants to see Graceland. I may be obliged to defend every love, every ending, or maybe there are no obligations now. Maybe I have reason to believe we will all be received in Graceland. Our merciful God opens his arms out to all of us as prodigals and says, welcome, destination, Graceland. That's how this pastor understands the word of God for you, the people of God, on this day. And we all say together, Amen.